So we're closing the meeting with a set of very distinguished guests. We are thankful that they came, found time in the busy schedule for joining this discussion. I'll do a brief introduction, then I'll tell you about what exactly are we trying to answer, and then see if we get some answers. So starting from the left to the right, Professor Dina Ben-Yehuda is one of the most experienced hematologists. I don't know how to say word. Hematologist.
Great.
In Israel and worldwide, and she's also the Dean of Medicine. She also just finished yesterday. She was the head of the Vadat Asal, for those who know what that is, where she had to raise question of cost benefits, equality, and many other consideration in how to best improve the medicine in Israel. I don't know if I want to say, and she came with her stethoscope, which shows she's a real doctor, because she forgot she has it on her when she left the faculty. Zach has spent 20 minutes introducing himself, so I will not repeat.
Thank you.
Ran Balicer is the head of, you will tell me the exact name, but the head of research in Clalit. Would that be Dr. Ran Balicer?
Yeah. Innovation.
Is one of the people who've been pushing research in medical records in Israel, and a powerhouse in dealing with how can we improve medicine using this kind of information. Do I want to say anything more about Ran? Moti, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Muszkat, right? Muszkat. Dr. Moti Muszkat is a clinician, the head of Department of Internal Medicine at Hadassah. He's also the head of a new program for bioethics, master program, right? For bioethics at the Hebrew University. Do I need to say more? Okay, I didn't do my homework as usual. So we have the panel is trying to ask what are the implications on society of AI, both questions about, how do we get from all those cool ideas we were talking to actually improving the experience of the patient, and the treatment, how to improve the system, and many questions that comes with it about ethic, morality. Zach, for those, I think everyone here was in this talk yesterday, talked about whether we need a doctor in the loop, and touched about some of those subjects, but those subjects of, how do we take consideration by a machine and weigh them with consideration of humanity.
You probably did it without doctors in the room.
He is a doctor.
Oh,
But because I'm a doctor, I probably have the least regard for doctors.
Yeah.
In fact, let me just quickly tell the truth.
Well, since we are talking, it's recorded. If we are talking, let's use the mic.
So, of course.
But I wanted to actually.
Yeah, why don't you set it up?
Yeah. So the question, I think, since it's a very diverse audience and everyone here has a lot of things we can learn from, I'll try to keep it slightly focused. And so the question is, I think, from the perspective of medicine, the patient, the doctors, the system, what do you think are the major changes that AI will bring? This is the first question, and the second question, which we can do either for the second round, but I'm preparing it, is what are the challenges that these will pose, not just in implementing those changes, but in reacting to those changes. I think those are the two main topics.
Well, since hematologists make even less money than endocrinologists, why don't you start?
you start.
All right. Okay, so I would say the biggest change is going to be that that patients are going to have a greater say in their own care. There's been, for the last 40 years, a decreasing gap in authoritativeness between doctors and patience. In medical school, we were taught, but most of us did not really obey, the notion of joint decision-making. But the advent of Google was transformative in the ability, with all the wrong things that Google supports, was still transformative in the power that patients had of better understanding of what is going on. And for those of us who worked with rare diseases, I can tell you, I remember all too well, when I was a pediatric resident, how a mother who, I remember this beautiful lady who had a kid with a metabolic disease. She knew more about metabolism than 95% of the doctors there. But we have used the prestige, declining prestige, and the authoritativeness given to us by our institutions to maintain at least the illusion of a gap in authoritativeness. I think that what these latest conversational generative models have shown is they are going to leapfrog. So if there was going to be if there was a transformational effect of having Dr. Google, Dr. ChatGPT++, it is going to be very much different. Just 2 weeks ago, I gave it a case, and there's ways of structuring it so you can give the whole case, of getting called down to the true story of the, from a call room to a nursery, and presented with twins. Both had small penises. One had a hole in the base of the penis. And I asked, so what's the next step? And I keep on having this conversation with ChatGPT. And this is a conversation I guarantee you 99% of doctors cannot have. What's the differential diagnosis? Is it based on gonads? Is it based on the adrenal gland? What tests to order? Is the uterus going to be shown on the, if we're seeing the uterus on ultrasound make a difference or not? Having a parent have this tool would make them no more than 99% of doctors. And I could go on about that, but I think it's going to be transformative in a way that I think the medical establishment will find challenging. It will result in some appalling things, but overall, I think it's going to result in very good things. And because I'm getting tired, and whenever I get tired in my own talks, I have to make slightly bad jokes.
And then I'll cut you.
But then you cut me. So in medical school, we looked around, and then we realized afterwards, and forgive me, because these are generalizations that don't hold true universally, except mostly. We looked around, who went into psychiatry in medical school? People had some psychological issues that they had to work through. And we looked, who went into ethics? People who had ethical issues. And that's why I'm not always sure to go to the ethics folks. I'm having a blank. There was there's a very famous Jewish family. Father was an Irgunist. The son ended up in the White House. The other son ended up being a superpowered agent. And the third son was an ethicist. Do you know what I'm talking about? What's
Ron as a kid.
Yeah, thank you. What's the last name?
Emmanuel.
Thank you, Emmanuel. So I was a founder of the Center for Outcomes and Policy Research at the Dana-Farber with Ezekiel Emmanuel. And then I saw very fine man. But of course, just 5 years ago, he wrote this article about basically how we should all be dead after 70. I'm waiting for him to commit himself to the extermination chamber in another 3 years. But anyway.
I'm not sure about the joke, but let's continue with it.
I said it was a bad joke, but I'm tired.
Okay, so that's a tough act to follow. If I had to choose one, I would say that one of the things that will change is that we are still practicing what is very much the old paradigm of reactive medicine, which means imagine that you have a car, and the only time you take it to the shop is when you're stuck in the middle of the road with smoke coming out of the engine. And that's when you go to see the car shop. Now, you wouldn't treat your car like this, right? You have some basic principles of preventive approach and preventive maintenance that we all do for our cars, but we don't act that way for medicine and for our own bodies. Basically, we wait for dysfunction, for pain, and in many instances, when you get to that point, the organ of interest is beyond repair to some extent, sometimes fully. If we take, for example, chronic renal failure, by the time you have symptoms of chronic renal failure, your kidneys are toast. You will end up, you most likely will not be able to prevent eventual dialysis. But if you come just a little bit earlier, this point in which is what is called CKD stage 3, when it's symptomless, but there's already signs and symptoms, then you make a whole change. Now, I think that the combination of ubiquitous data that's available for all of us within records and from many other sources of data, coupled with what is already a commodity type of AI, would change the paradigm towards much more predictive, proactive. So the physician would actually be contacting the patient upon the early enough point in time in which they can prevent future illness in the case of primary prevention, or prevent exacerbation in the point of secondary prevention. And this will become the normal mainstay. And as in cars, when something fails, that's a failure of the system. That's not the usual case. So the availability of AI, that is one big change it's going to have. And maybe just one additional point. It's also going to change, and it goes back to Zach's point, we still practice care in a very intuitive way. We're really proud of our clinical intuition. We hail that in med school. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, there's no other, point of human action that you would be exceedingly proud about using zero data in instances or ignoring the data in others and just going full-blown intuition.
I always use like psychic car mechanics.
Yeah, I can see that happening in Boston, or in California even more so, yes. But the move from intuitive to something that is injects a little bit more science into healthcare and medicine, that would be, I think, a great change, and it's happening. So it's not like, doctors will be replaced by machines, but as they say, doctors who don't use AI will be replaced by doctors who do. Because going fully intuitive and with no safety net doesn't make any sense these days. So if you're a pathologist and you don't have a machine that goes after, does a second read after you with AI-driven power, that doesn't make sense. And maybe you should have the AI read before you go ahead and look at the pathology slide. And if you want to say that the machine is wrong, that's fine, but at least you have something that's grounding you, that's based on data, and probably is better than looking at pictures than you are, especially at 2 a.m. after you've seen 1,700 of those and haven't slept for 2 days.
I agree with many of the comments, so I won't repeat the same line, but I think it will make society re-examine the role of medicine. Because now we don't only go for physicians to get the best advice how not to get sick. We go for many other reasons. And we'll have to think about who's filling that gap when the machine will do most of the decision-making process, augmenting the decision-making process of the physician. But the other stuff will not, we have to think who will take care of the other stuff. Mediating the information, complex communication problems. It's not just getting the direct-to-consumer information. I wouldn't like to get my biopsy results getting by mail to me without my physician moderating this scenario. So we have to think about many other things that are left behind. It's not that AI is going to replace medicine or even take major part of the physician's role without the society having to support the other roles that are not supported by AI.
Yeah. We have another mic, so Dina.
I don't think that they have something to add.
I'm sure you have something to add in the question of how the patients and how we train the physicians to work in this world where the authority is lower, the patients are smarter or know more facts to say, and the interface to the patient is changing dramatically.
So the fact that I didn't want to go on with their discussion is because I want afterwards to show the other side of the coin. But as for educating the future physicians, I have what to say. I did my fellowship in Memorial Sloan Kettering, and I learned there how to do PCR. Nowadays, everybody knows what PCR is, but at that time, I was the first in Israel, and I came to my senior physicians, and I said that I learned a method in which I can allocate one leukemic cells among millions of normal cells. And they said, Dina, to do diagnosis of leukemia, you look at the microscope. With me came very talented physicians who studied in the States how to do laparoscopy. And at that time, the elderly surgeons had a very interesting say, small surgeon, small cut. Big surgeons, big cut. And they went on doing open abdomens to take when the method was here. So one of the things that I was worried about when I started to be a dean is that we are educating physicians that will be like all the others. We're very conservative as physicians, and I think that it's good that we are. But I can see how physicians will be the enemies of AI, and I believe that AI is important, not as much as you, but I believe that AI is very important in medicine. So we decided to educate the talented students to speak. That's something that I learned from Nir, to speak the two languages, computational science and medicine. And they will be like the bridge between physicians that will be scared from the new threat on medicine and the AI era of digital medicine. And we have now 74 students. They started 4 years ago. They are doing 3 years that they are studying together computational medicine and medicine. And in the 4th year, they do computational science only. And the first course is now in the clinical world. And it's amazing. It's really amazing.
It's very unusual.
They're so smart. And the nicest thing about it, that I was very scared that we are growing up another generation of physicians that will go to the industry and to high tech, but they could go everywhere, and they decided to be physicians, and they are all going that way, and I'm very happy about it. And they understand that AI will not replace physicians.
By the way, I just want to make sure that was my whole point in my talk yesterday, because I start with a video, an infamous video of one of the leaders of neural network technology, Jeffrey Hinton, saying in 2016, we will not have to train any more radiologists. He's a brilliant man, but on this he was an idiot. And you're right, but I think it's what Ron, the measured response is what Ron said, which is physicians who don't use computers will be replaced by those who do. And so I was trained as a resident by a very nice hematologist, David Nathan, who did some of the early work, as you know, in various hemoglobinopathies. And I remember we had a case that he was actually the only one in the room, even though he's not trained as a pediatrician, who got, just for your entertainment, but I asked it ChatGPT and it got it. Baby shows up. Back then, I didn't say this, it looked like an AIDS baby. Very, very pale. And it looked a little bit Asian, so I assumed, and it had 2 mothers, not a dad, so I assumed it was adopted. I was correct. I was the admitting doctor. And the mothers were seen at the Cambridge Women's Health Collective and couldn't figure out what was going on. But we reported that that they were feeding the child with goat's milk. Then if you look on this on the smear, it's had what's called a megaloblastic anemia. Turns out, unlike human milk or cow's milk, goat's milk is very depleted in folate, and so it's a interesting, important fact. And the moment we gave this child folate, most amazing bone marrow recovery I've ever seen. But the point is, some of these facts are hard to find. And bizarrely, this adult trained hematologist, David, actually knew it. So that's where I think there's very few David Nathans, and I don't want to count on them being there. And so I think that these individuals who know how to use knowledge bases, just how we learned how to use textbooks, just how we learned how to look at a smear, we learned to look at this stupid machine, which actually knows nothing, expresses behavior that looks very intelligent.
So, I have my own mic. So, I do want to talk about. I think the three of you, Dina was more skeptical. We're talking about the smart doctor.
As it should be, as she should be.
The smart doctor who will use AI, but it seems like for many people who we're talking here, the impression is that getting to AI to be actually used by doctors is a major challenge. And I think Zach yesterday talked about it as well, and you brought several examples, so we won't rerun through them. Is the system able to do it, or it will only come through the iPhone of the patient, and essentially the back door, and not through the main door of the clinic?
Let me quickly say that we have a problem in America that I don't think you have, which is we get paid the more things we do.
Okay.
And so if the right thing to do is to not do something, which a smart program will do, no one's going to want that.
Okay. Well, I want to hear Ron's perspective because he's representing the biggest HMO in Israel, so probably you run into this question.
Yeah, and we actually try to walk the walk rather than talk the talk. And what we've been doing, we've had predictive models that could ascribe for predictive care. Back in 2009, our first models came out, and we began trying to put them into practice. It was a really uphill battle for all the reasons that you mentioned and several others. Physicians are pretty busy during their day, and you'll be surprised, but the last thing they want from you is more data. So you expect, no, but I'll give you, the outcomes, predictives, and you'll get, a lot of new inferences that you can. What are you talking about? They have 5 minutes. They can't even have time to read the record as it is, to go through physical, discuss with the patient, and get him out of the room. You're going to add additional set of data? Yeah, why not? Add all the variants also that you have found in their genome. Just add it, and they'll be very thankful to you. You'll get shot out of the clinic. And so if you want to get something that is useful, you have to embed it within the workflows of these physicians and account for what their day looks like and what a patient encounter looks like. So what we've been doing in the last 5 years was creating new types of platforms that, as Zach said, could probably only work in this country for multiple amount of reasons, because of the data we have, because of the knowledge, know-how we created, but also because our incentives are well aligned in this country, where proactive medicine actually also pays off to the system and not works against the incentives of the system. And so what we've created, and actually this is spearheaded by a physician that is a graduate of this establishment, Dr. Noah Dagan, who's also the first graduate of our residency program at Clalit, which is a dual residency in computer sciences and public health. And the first Berkowitz Fellow within our joint Harvard-Clalit Center, so she's now a postdoc from Harvard as well. And the program, this platform that we created takes predictive medicine and puts it at the hands of physicians in a seamless way that goes along with their workflow. So when the physician gets up at Clalit in the morning and opens their computer, their screen actually is an integrated screen that tells them who are the 10 patients within their 1,500 or 2,000 patients that they have that would most benefit today from proactive care. And as they click on that patient, they see everything already sorted out to them, from the reasons why a recommendation is given, to what the recommendation is, to how this translates into practice. And also, as you click a button, within a few months, this will go directly into the EMR and go into action.
And you pay your doctors
Yes.
couple for...
Yes, and we actually have an incentive program in which we pay for that time of proactive care within their workday. So you add all of this together, then suddenly you have something that is sustainable within a working healthcare system, and we are exceedingly proud of this. The system has won the biggest prize of the reboot, the annual practice innovation in healthcare last year, and I think it is transforming healthcare towards predictive, proactive in a way that general practitioners can actually bear.
I would ask the same question in the hospital, because
I think we are far behind in the hospital. I think that I don't see why this wonderful program shouldn't work. I think that if you pay physicians for their time, they'll do a reasonable effort to do a good thing. They won't refuse to do that. The problem with the system is that it does not pay physicians for extra work. But if such a pilot or such an initiative is going to be paid, so I sit with the patients who come to me with questions about drug interactions, and they say, I cannot take that because it doesn't work with other medication. I know it doesn't work. It is not true, the information they give me. So I say, let's go over a database and see if there's an interaction. One database, no interaction. Second database, there's no interaction. Patient is more satisfied. He was not dismissed, but he was heard. And I did an effort to check it. If a machine would do that effort in a way that is trusted by the patient, I don't see why it shouldn't work. So we have to educate physicians to be able to understand that their memory, not their intelligence, but their memory is not as good as that of the computer, and their analyzing abilities. So if they understand that, if they are modest enough, I think they will be willing to use this tool. Maybe I'm naive, but I don't see why it should not work.
So I want to take a twist on that, because all of you, to some extent, said that the physicians have to adapt, which I'm sure is true. But I think the system has to adapt first. And what worries me about one scenario of the 10 most urgent proactive activities, and I guess if we'll have a similar system in the internal medicine for the 10 most acute patients that need to be looked at what point do we give the system too much control of what the doctor is doing? Is there a patient that is going to be left behind because they don't have the smartwatch that updates the clinic system? Or
Here, Nir going for intuitive medicine.
I'm not going for intuitive medicine. I'm going for ethics. I'm trying.
By the way, it's a great point, and I want to tell you, I was really blown away by not the panel of patients with priorities, but the fact that they said you can substitute 2 hours, and we're going to pay you full cost of your salary to go for it. That, first of all, that does not exist in the United States. The only people who look at panels of patients are the insurance people, but they're not taking care of the patients, so it's a huge disconnect. So I agree with what you said. I think it will be doable if you have incentive, but it's going to take a certain kind of leadership to make that happen. And I'd love to hear how we make that.
Let me tell you about the reality in my hospital.
Okay.
So about half of the patients in my department are coming from Eastern Jerusalem, where their HMO is not done in a computerized way. The physicians...
It's Kladit? Yes, terrible. You didn't tell me about
their
that.
physicians are getting the cards of the patients, and they're doing everything in a semi-private a way which I don't know exactly how it works, because if I know too much, I'll be blamed in something. But it works, and the physicians are really making a lot of money of the families they are taking care of. And the documentation is very poor. So these people, I don't have almost any data to go back and understand what's going on with them. So essentially they are going to be underrepresented in such a database. And they are going to be underserved, not only because of the income status and the Apple Watch and so on, but because inherent problems in healthcare, in public healthcare. So there's still a way to go before we could launch such a nice initiative in the hospital. I'm not sure we're there.
Dina, what's your take?
We initiated something here in Jerusalem. We thought that it's a small city, but with a lot of population. We have only 2 hospitals. We have 2 major sick funds, which are Klalit and Muszkat. And we decided that we will start, because, let's say, in Israel we do not have data sharing between institutions, and I know that it's the same in the States.
I was saying, it's true throughout the world.
So what we did, we decided to do Jerusalem Center for computational precision medicine, and the 2 hospitals that were big rivals before decided to collaborate, and we are sharing data now with Muszkat, Klalit, Shaarei Tzedek, and Hadassah. We ran a few pilot projects. We also, with a donation from Yad Nadiv and from Harley, the Jerusalem Development Society, we got money, and we started to build fire program. We have it in Hadassah and in Shaarei Tzedek. Muszkat is very close to. Klalit decided not to join it, and I hope that it will become more and more. We now have a very strong data on deliveries and babies. We have a huge data set, and I think that this kind of collaboration is a must. And I also agree with Nir that we shouldn't wait for the physicians to bring AI into common practice. It should be from the regulators and from the government, and I also think that we should teach the older physicians not to be afraid from AI. And Michal Rosenzweig here is helping us. We have post a continuation program for physicians, and she is delivering now a course for our physicians and nurses. So I think that one of the things that I want to tell you 3, that and I know that Moti is not among this, but I think that there is something that you should be, I don't want to use careful from, but one of the things that I would like you to use whenever you talk about AI is compassion. Because there is a big AI by the name of Kai Fu, who tried to find out which professions will disappear with the AI. And the parameters that he used were, you need compassion or you don't need compassion. Is it something that is just developing a system that is already here, or you have to innovate something. And where you need compassion and innovation, you need human. And I believe that people will always need the touch of other people. I think that doing physical examination is part of healing and building trust. So I think that we should be very careful from trying to show that the AI will bring a very huge revolution in medicine. And I also want to emphasize that health equity is in a big danger with the AI, a huge danger. You know, with this committee of, we have a committee here of, we call it the health basket, where every year we are adding money to the health basket. And this year we had 650 million shekels to add for the health basket. We had more than 300 technologies that we started with. The sum was 2 billion, and we had to cut it down. And while we were discussing things, I thought to myself, probably I should bring my students, the computational medicine students. They will find an algorithm and they will help us in the decision. And the more we advanced with this meeting, when we came to the last night, where we had to cut only 100 million from the technologies that came up at that time, I understood that it could never happen, because there where compassion was the only actor in the play. And so I think that whenever we talk about AI medicine, we need to do the balance.
I completely agree, and the value you're saying is central. So now I'll just speak about something I know, which is the United States. Under the pressures of 10-minute visits, where you're also dealing with another computer program, the electronic health record, and you're stuffing it with enough information so that a bureaucrat, I don't see a lot of compassion or time left for compassion. I really don't. And I've been a patient as well. And we all know our colleagues who are more compassionate than others. And we know some of our colleagues who are just really not superb human beings. And sometimes you have to make a decision. Do I send my loved one to this great OBGYN who is really terrific in a pinch, but has zero bedside manner and is actually not a nice person? But maybe we want that for that critical moment. But I think that the pressures of modern medicine are squeezing out all our compassion, not all the way. Now, in those meetings for the last $100 million, which is probably the most difficult $100 million, of course, because we have time to think, you're going to hear the compassion. I'm telling you that from my perspective in the United States, I'm seeing compassion getting squeezed more and more out. And I am, I did my PhD in computer science right before my clinical training, when we really thought that something good was going to happen, and it didn't. It's called AI winter, because our expectations were so low. But here, I think there's a real opportunity. We didn't talk about it here tonight, but this afternoon. But there is actually a possibility. Depends how the politics go, but technologically, to actually make much more face time with the patient.
I agree 100%.
And because that's in the end is the most important thing. You just cannot be compassionate if you're getting squeezed like a lemon in a lemon press. And so, I was talking to Mark Cuban. He's a famous billionaire. He's famous in the United States because of a TV program called Shark Tank, where people come. And I was talking to him about this, and he pointed out there would have been a better reception for AI, in his opinion, back when primary care in the United States was really run by generalists who had time. Because then there was time to interact with patients, time to listen to what the AI said. He says right now, he's feeling actually a lot more pessimistic about AI in healthcare because the squeeze on the clinicians in terms of productivity is such that he doesn't think it's going to add. And so he said, from his perspective as an investment, medicine would not be in the first place. He would be applying healthcare.
I want to follow on this point, and it's good that you have the mic because I was going to ask Ran. So, Zach has talked about something that I think many people raise is about, can the patient get access to their data in a way that will allow them not just to look at it, but also to ask for AI expertise outside the system. So I think I won't repeat the whole thing, but the bottom line was that systems like Apple Health provide the ability to get information from health care providers onto your phone in a secure way and allow the user to decide which apps can access it and do whatever they do, find that. Including doing strange things like suggest, I guess, homeopathic drugs and things like that. But on the other hand, it opens the field for innovation, for competition on who can do the better help for the patient and so on. Is this something that's going to happen in Israel, or is it something that the HMOs will have to be, will stop? I mean, I think it's...
It's a balancing act, okay?
Yeah.
There's no answer that goes this way. We need to balance some really important things on the scale. The issues of privacy are critical. I mean, sometimes they're used as an excuse when somebody doesn't want to share data, so they use privacy as an excuse. But if we put that aside for a second, there's also, a serious issue. We see individuals, organizations, and governments misuse the data that they have about people in various ways. And you might feel, we've seen in different countries, one minute you feel you're safe, and another minute you feel you're not as safe as you thought you were. And then you're really happy that what's private is private, and what is not. And it is still the case that these independent organizations are, I think, at this point, still the safest haven available at this point. That being said, the data belongs to the patient and is there to manipulate as they see fit and to take risky decisions should they choose to, as long as they've been properly informed and have safe alternatives to do that. So, that's the balancing act we need to have. Now, we know that people don't read the, sign here,
Yeah.
right? You get the 5 pages of disclaimer, and in the middle it says you need to donate your liver while alive, and you just sign it at the end. Accept all cookies, yes. And you gotta go ahead. And look, there's a cute app. It will show you how you look in 5 years. All you need to do is surrender all of your privacy, your details, your bank account, and yeah, sure, it looks like really cool. Why not yet? So we also need to make sure that people understand what they're subscribing for. So the bottom line is yes, absolutely. Data belongs to the patient. Eventually, they should be the ones deciding who they want to share it with and in what way. It's our responsibility to make sure that they know exactly what they're doing and that they fully understand the implications, and that everything is done in a way that is there's a way back. Sometimes there's when you lose your private data to cyberspace, that's it. There's no going back. So even when data is shared, we should make sure it is shared in a way that this says ooh, can I delete that? There is a way to do that, and this is what we're working on, and making sure that we have safe platforms to share data. Clalit just went out with a platform for sharing data. This is after all of we spent a lot of time and effort, trouble, money, to make sure what we're doing is safe for the patient, and if a mistake was made, that he didn't lose forever his most intimate and private details. And we are able now to collaborate with international and local entities through this data in a safe and an effective manner. So
And I think it's a real question whether it's the role of the HMO to give all the guarantees, or you have to have a regulator that is also controlling the other players in the market.
How can you regulate private entities in the market to an extent which is appropriate? It's a shared responsibility, but since we are the guarantors of and holding the data on behalf of the patients before we surrender it, there's a minimum level of requirements we need to make sure we didn't make really, really big mistakes. What do you say, Zach? I see that you're moving.
No, I'm just reminded, long story, briefly, of a chief medical librarian of Harvard Medical School. So I took advantage to host a symposium on Jewish medieval medicine. And I learned that the consent that was given in medieval times by Jewish doctors, because if the patient died, one outcome might be a pogrom. So the consent that patients signed, hopefully when they read it, was, I admit I am now as good as dead. And if everything is done to me that causes me to be dead, I will be no worse off than I currently am. So maybe we need that kind of consent. Yeah.
Sign here.
No, it was great. We have the manuscripts with these medieval consent.
I'm still worried about what would be left from the ethical point of view. What would be left of medicine after which parts are going to go to AI, which parts are going to stay with the physician-patient interaction. And it's not clear to me. It's clear that simple diagnostic problems like show me your throat, take your temperature, take your pulse, take your ECG with a remote equipment, that's okay. And you could say that the patient is high likely to have bacterial tonsillitis, and he'll send the swab and he can start the antibiotics right away. However, there are problems that are not well defined. A patient came to me this week, a young Haredi lady with her husband, saying that she is very tired. She's very tired, she's very tired, she's very tired. Apparently, she was looking for justification to get oral contraceptives for it. So I could guess that a machine could get to that conclusion in the end. But how to handle that type of communication? And this is not a very complicated medical case. Now look at all the medical cases that I have in my department, that parts of the history are totally irrelevant to the diagnosis. People come complaining of one thing, ending up in having totally different problem. What do we do with the chief complaint of the patient? There was an old saying, listen to the patient, he's giving you the diagnosis. Is he or is she? I'm not sure. How's the machine going to disregard or interpret the chief complaint in such complex problems? So simple problems can be handled simply. Complex problems should wait for a more complicated approach. And the approach to look of high-risk patients in a preventive way is excellent because it doesn't fall into these traps of over-interpretation or under-interpretation of patients' complaints. Just
So
looked at risk factors and trying to avoid the deterioration.
So I think that's great in a canonical view of medicine. In the actual practice of medicine, we have our very own Ben Rice, who gave us a counter example. In the state of Massachusetts, you are obligated to ask every person coming to the emergency room, do you feel safe at home? And we do ask that question. So Ben Rice, who's sometimes around here at Hebrew U, who's also on our faculty, wrote a little program with a trivial machine learning program. It was a naive Bayes predictor. It was able to show just using the discharge diagnosis, not the text, just the discharge diagnosis of emergency room, he could predict domestic abuse in our patients on average 2 years before the healthcare system, and up to 6 years. In a state that was mandated, and it's not that we weren't asking questions, we do. If someone has a broken leg, and you're pressed, and you say, we'll take care of your leg. Do you feel safe at home? And they don't answer. They say, oh yeah, okay, fine, let's go take care of the leg. I think that you're right. Your patient was lucky to have you think, why are they asking me about the fatigue? I think there's so many things like that that it's so uneven that at a systems level, I'll take my bets on a well-intentioned view plus some serious backup.
But I think the challenge is how to combine the two.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
Absolutely,
Ron,
and,
please.
and I would even go, I mean, this is just a more elaborate algorithm to be able to do that. Okay, so you do anomaly detection, you have some capabilities of doing that, as a, you know, with what you've seen until now in your basic intuition. You know, there are even things like you say, no, but I look at the patient, I see their mimics, I see the way they smile, like, right, I know that computers do that pretty well right now. They know if you're lying or not. They can look at your face. We have now apps in Israel, they look at your face. They can tell a lot of biological measurements on you just from the video of your face. They can sense the emotion. They can listen to your voice. Through the listening to your voice, they can hear your heart rate. They can find anomalies there. There are many things that, if eventually what you're trying to do is...
imagine that Ron's old unit 8200 must be working on that.
I will not deny nor confirm.
Right.
But all I'm saying is it sounds like it's something that computers will never be able to do, but that's the other way around. These kinds of abilities, actually, computers will excel in probably better than we, and it wouldn't take too long.
And now I'm scared. So, question from the audience. Yeah, 1 and 2.
So one issue that I asked you yesterday, and maybe I'll ask again, because
He's trying to see if I'm a deterministic machine.
Maybe not explain myself yesterday. So I'm an internal medicine resident, and I also have a master's for information system engineering. And as a resident, I see that our practice of medicine in the day-to-day life is more or less, well, we have evidence-based, we have that, we have electronic records, which keeps the records and we have access, but that's it. We are doing more or less the same the doctor did 40 years ago. Any other industry is transformed by computer, by the digitalization, by data, and we have a lot of ideas where we can improve it, but nobody seems to, well, the system doesn't seem to take emphasis on it on the one side. On the other side, when they do, for example, Israel has the chameleon, which is like the HR for the hospitals, and we had a meeting with our head of the hospital, Roni Gamzo, with the representatives from the company. And we had a new version coming out, which was horrible, which did a lot of weird stuff that hurt the work process of the doctors. And we asked, did somebody sit with the doctors and the nurses and seen what they are doing in the day-to-day life? And there was none. There were 2 nurses on the staff that were not practicing, and no doctor was in the loop. And the result was the same. And it's like, despite a lot of money, despite it was a national project in this Ministry of Health, it was not.
So
it's not.
And in the US, it's only the payer is going to be involved.
So I have 2 answers to that. First, let me start with a story. I wrote an article for our local public radio station. True story. I said, I looked around, and there was this team of individuals engaged in a very complex task. And they were across 20 square miles of Boston. And they had a very complex virtual environment that they could visualize on screen so they could see where each other were. And at the same time, real-time audio video to each other. So the problem is, those were my son and all his 10-year-old friends back then, using FaceTime to yell at each other and using Minecraft, common visualization, to go through this complex screen. I said, how come I don't know where all my residents are and where my team is? I don't know how to get hold of them. And here they have this massively coordinated behavior. So one is just as an existent proof that it's doable. But I think if the problem is, out of good reasons of safety and security, our tendency is to go towards these massive unitary systems. So if you look at these massive enterprise programs, like Salesforce, like, what's the manufacturing company?
Epic.
No, manufacturing.
Monday.
What?
Monday.
No, it's the German company, the manufacturing process, whatever. The problem, all of those very large systems, where you have one solution for a whole industry, where actually there's very different things, it's hard to create in one mega app all things. And we've seen it from something as small as grant writing. Enterprise-wide solution ends up having many corner cases where it's actually doing more harm than good. The solutions that have worked well in sort of Silicon Valley speak is to stick together a Slack for communications, an iPhone for videos, and actually I wrote a New England Journal article maybe 15 years ago talking about the problem of medical exceptionalism. We need to bury all these common functions into one EHR app. But I think we do it out of abundance of caution, because you're correctly afraid that someone might stitch it together in ways that are not good. Worst thing that happened to those 10-year-olds is that they would be beaten by the zombies in Minecraft. Someone loses their life, not so good. And so it's, I think, because the trade-offs are so sensitive that we're giving ourselves much less flexibility.
The thing is, for example, the example you said about the family abuse, it was devised in 2009.
Yes.
And it's only right now getting adopted, and it's not yet even out. So it's 13 years
It's
on a program
disastrous.
which is very simple and
Yes.
easy to understand, very useful,
Yep.
and still does not happen. Why?
It's leadership. That's a medical leadership
Yeah.
issue.
We're teaching it from the first year of medical school, that this is one of the questions should be asked.
Yeah, I think the
But
question
the
is
question
integrating.
whether the system
Yeah.
itself does
But-
not support this. Why? It feels like from the people who are, well, you actually. I'm sorry, but it's not as important, and it's not as
Okay,
encouraged.
short answer, or we'll
Sorry.
take it offline?
Offline.
Offline, so question.
Okay, I had a comment which about the same that in my opinion AI is made to help doctors to do physical conclusions faster, so they could put their energy on the mental health or compassion and other things. So there's no need to computer to do it. Computer helps doctor to do all physical decisions, and others and doctors like mental things. And my question was from another view: aren't you, as the doctor, scared that in 30, 50 years, then AI in medicine will be usual? Then a new generation of doctors don't understand the beginning of the medicine.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
I think I want to hear Dina's
Yeah.
thoughts about that.
Well, it's a good question.
I have to admit that I don't scare from it, because I think that in the end of the day, people that will decide to go to study medicine will go there because they will want to treat patients. And I don't think that the conservative medicine will disappear, because I think that people nature will be the same. And as one of our poems wrote, that we all need some compassion, we'll all need the touch. And I think that this is something that will be here forever, I hope. So that's why I'm not afraid from it. I think that people will not go to study medicine to practice AI.
I think
Go ahead.
I think that the simple case that I suggested is saying that there's always a place for a physician, thoughtful physician, like the physician who will follow starting now learning medicine, to get deeper into a question. I understand that an algorithm could suggest that this lady needs or wants oral contraceptives, but would it communicate it with her? Because her realization of it's a process. It's not just an algorithm that gives you the answer, suggest, offer that option. It needs to be a mutual development of that idea that worked. So the algorithm could get to the conclusion. An algorithm could augment my ability to suggest that. Note, she might be asking for something else, and I would be the one to communicate it in a way that she could accept it. But without the physician in the middle, and this is an answer for you, without the physician in the middle, it won't happen.
I would just say this reminds me, sorry.
Yeah.
This reminds me of the example exactly before about the lap surgery. So we shouldn't do lap surgery because then physicians will not know how to do big cuts and to do the proper. People were actually saying that when I was in medicine. They said, what happens if we train everybody to do just that? We have to continue doing the big surgery because otherwise when you need to do big surgery, you will not know how. So we shouldn't do it. נכון? אז גם אני זוכר, זה היה ככה. עכשיו, now, so is that a reason for us not to do some patients lap surgery because we want to maintain the ability to do the old? No. And apparently there are other ways in which you can practice the old ways during your, during the 5% that you need that, and that would be in this case too. 5% you need to go on the non-automated, 10%, 20%, doesn't matter, and then you go in and you'll practice it. But the fact that you 80% will be off your plate will give you so much more time and so much more mental space and so much more ability to do the good old medicine as it should be, rather than the factory that it is right now.
Okay. Very quick question, yes, no answers.
No.
No.
Okay.
Not in this panel.
Very quick, about the incident of the contraceptive. Computers will enable people like that to avoid the embarrassment. I mean, she was very embarrassed, and she had a hard time to reach the right.
There was a very early program called Eliza.
We actually, yeah, we discussed it in the school. I'm sorry I'm cutting people off, but quick answer, yeah.
I don't totally agree with you, because that's another issue of AI. The ethics, how AI regards ethical issues. And TextGPT avoided it completely, and that's a nice thing to do for a starter. But when you put in an AI into medicine, you have to look for the ethics of it. And that lady wouldn't take the option if it was on a computer. But if a physician say that maybe for her own health, it should be reasonable to delay further pregnancies because she had already 6 pregnancies in 5 years or something. So maybe it was reasonable to wait, and I said it very gently, the computer wouldn't do to do.
You haven't seen my Haredi ChatGPT, which was paid us, does a great job. And
Can we have one of the mics? Oh, yeah.
I just want to say the right word to say is trust.
Yeah, yes.
And I think that for a long time from now, people will trust people more than computers. And there is a good, I'm sorry that I'm talking computational, though I don't understand anything, but I would say black boxes. And I think that if even the one who wrote the algorithm cannot understand why the machine decided this way or another, I still prefer human.
So, I want to quickly say this because we really have to learn from other industries. We think we deal with life-death decisions all day. You know who deals with life decisions every microsecond? Cars. And we actually now, and in Israel, more so than most, but also in America, we kill a lot of people more than the wars driving. And if you have a Tesla, as I do, as opposed to my other younger faculty of Tesla, I turned out to be a terrible driver. It did not let me switch on full autonomous driving until I passed certain tests of quality. It took me 2 years to get there, whereas my student got there in a month. Do we ever do that in medicine? No. And the death rate by this black box is lower. And so I think, again, we have to look at the practice of reality versus.
We're getting finally heated up. Okay.
So here's the analogy, and I think it goes a nice way, but I don't think it totally fits the problem. Should we develop an AI that would do as good as physicians do?
Or better.
Or
That's
better?
right.
Or am I interested in how many physicians in your city would treat that lady the same way you did, or would suggest her to take so and so many antibiotics for an infection? Or should we build an AI that is based on outcome data? Because I'm not interested so much in what other mediocre physicians would decide to do. I'm interested in what improves the outcome of my patients. I would like an AI that could predict how to avoid 7 days mortality after discharge from my department, 30 days return. I'm not interested so much if many physicians would treat her 5 days antibiotics or 4 days antibiotics. This is not good medicine for me.
So this comes to the question of whether we're asking, I'm trying to translate, because how to avoid mistakes is essentially supporting the humans. We mentioned about the fact that we don't remember the goat meal story and so on. To what extent are the technologies today attacking the easier problems because they can, or rather than the hard problems, like telling you that the patient is likely to return very soon and you have to pay more attention to, again, I don't know even how to phrase the medical side of it, but how to avoid the repeat visits.
10 seconds. I think the question we have to ask ourselves, are we impressed enough that of the gains we would have of making the bottom half of doctors as good as the top half of doctors? Or should we wait for Mashiach and go totally outcome driven? I think we should do both. But my sense is what's realizable in the near term is just making the bottom half as good as the top half.
Same thought, different direction. How good is your average physician? How good?
Incredibly very good.
Of course.
Yeah.
Much better than Harvard. But still, how good is your average physician? What's the score? 67? 58? 75? In Ichilot. How's the average physician doing?
How do you
How many
How
mistakes?
do you score?
Oh, well, hello. Which opens a discussion for which you need a different course, which is one of the other domains that I'm very interested in, which is outcome measurement and how you actually do this assessment, and how come physicians in hospitals have zero follow-up on their patients and knowing how well they're doing, and what happens since, and there's some good old quotes that go, 105 years old, that it couldn't be the fact that we don't have any follow-up, long-term follow-up on the cases that we care for, Kohane, and now still we're in the same position right now with no follow-up. You do not have outcome data, you do not analyze outcome data, you do not analyze physicians' performance, you don't do continuous medical education, you don't relicense, you don't do anything to make sure that physicians don't do I'm trying to avoid euphemisms. So we're all scrutinizing about the terrible mistakes AI will do. Well, what about natural intelligence? How well is that doing for us? And as and Alice said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And so this is where we are right now in medicine. We have zero assessment of what we're doing, but we're extremely scrutinizing all of the perils of Moderna and the whatever additional technology we're going to bring in. And repeat, near zero assessment to the current activities and what we call the ground truth or the safe precedent. So I'll stop there.
I think since we are running out of time, and I think Ron gave a very strong conclusion here, which highlights the both the paradox and the challenges of doing technology in medicine and in many other fields. Final sentence from anybody else that is going to beat Ran for the... Okay. No.
It's already here. We need to accommodate, and we all will.
So AI is going to show up, and we need to face it. We didn't get to talk about your worst fear with AI, but that's, I guess, another whole session. I want to thank...
That's the worst fear. Another session.
I want to thank especially the people who came especially for this, took time to show up here. It's totally not trivial, and we appreciate that. And I'm sure we can discuss this much longer, and I do hope that people will, if we take it, we'll stay a bit and discuss, but I already see Dina thinking about her next appointment. So thank you very much to the panel. And just before we stand, I want to thank again all the people who helped make this school happen. Michal deserves a lot of credit. I didn't do anything useful, except bring Michal in.